We're live. Okay, hey everybody. Thanks for joining us for this interview with Eboni J. Dunbar. I was gonna read from your bio from Stone and Steel, if that's okay, to let people know what you've done and all that good stuff.
Now I'm worried about what's in that bio, but
I'm just gonna look on your website. That's pretty brief.
Okay, good.
Eboni Dunbar is a queer Black woman who writes queer and Black speculative fiction. She resides in the San Francisco Bay Area with her partner. She received her BA from Macalester College and her MFA in creative writing from Mills College. She is a Vona alum, an associate editor for Podcastle, an acquiring editor for FIYA Literary Magazine, and a freelance reviewer. Her work can be found on FIYA, Drabblecast, Anathema, Spec from the Margins, and Nightlight Podcast. Anything you want to add to tell viewers a little bit more about yourself?
I mean, I think that's probably all of the basic stuff. Some things in there have changed. I'm not at Podcastle anymore, and I'm managing editor for FIYA, but pretty much it's all the same stuff.
Nice. So I was curious. So you've published several short stories before, but Stone and Steel is your first novella.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering, how is that transition from writing short stories to writing a novella? And what do you see as the strengths of each format?
Well, I think for me, they're actually kind of similar because I tend to write, and that it sort of depends. I write on the long side for short work and on the short side for long work. So it's actually not that weird. Like really, this was like, Stone and Steel probably started as a short story that got away from me, and then we ended up with a novella, and it all worked out. But I don't think it was my intention at first.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the interesting thing about telling a short story, right, the people who do it really well, is that they can do so much with so few words. I'm still figuring out how to do it with few words, but like all of my stuff, is like on the upper level of whatever folks publish for the most part. I'm like, can I have a few more words, please? I just need like another 100, another 1,000, please. But I love to see people who write short really well. Like I'm excited about Baffling, which is a new like short, like flash fiction magazine. I love the idea of that. I don't think I can ever do it because I just don't have the ability to constrain myself that much, but I love seeing people actually use the short form really well.
Yeah, flash fiction is pretty intense.
Right? Like 1,000 words to tell a whole story. Who can do such a thing? There are people. Not me.
Yeah. And then when I was reading your bio, I noticed that you've kind of been interacting with fantasy and like sci-fi from like a couple different roles. Like you were a writer, obviously, but you're also an editor and a reviewer. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of wondering, like, what has your relationship been like with the fantasy genre, and how has that changed over time?
Yeah, I have been writing fantasy since I was a kid, since I was technically not allowed to be writing fantasy. I grew up in a really religious household, so my entire family are Jehovah's Witnesses. So for them, I was like writing this stuff that was like antithetical to their beliefs. And so I would often be like writing in a closet, reading stuff that they're like, what is that? I don't understand what's happening over there. Should you really be reading that? But nobody was paying enough attention to realize that like, probably not. I think the exciting thing about doing reviews and being an editor is you start to get much more focused on what language can do and how language works. And I think it impacts the way that you look at your own writing. And so it's actually been great for me to be taking on those roles, because then I come back to my own work and I'm like, yeah, that didn't work in that thing I just read. And it probably won't work in my own work, even though I did that thing. So it's exciting to have the opportunity to see it in different ways, and especially at different lengths, right? Like I'm usually reviewing longer works, so novels, and so I can apply that to my novel work, but all of the editing I'm doing is short fiction, so I can apply the things I'm learning from that into my short work. So it's a nice balance.
Do you ever see yourself writing something longer form like a novel, or are you more comfortable on the shorter end?
No, I have a novel printed on the floor that needs to be edited. There's one, it's over here now. There's another one that like I need to read and edit. I have a bunch of long things that just need some love and attention, and then hopefully can bring them to the world eventually.
I'm excited. Yeah, I don't know. I really like novels, like short fiction. I don't know. I'm really like picky about short fiction. Like there's a certain arc that I like really like when short fiction takes it. But I feel like with novels, I'm like better at like accepting like a lot of different forms. If that makes any
Yeah,
sense.
you have the space to actually like suspend your disbelief or dive in with the character, the short form. That the people who do short work really well can give you that in the short pages. But I hear you. It's hard sometimes to feel like this is all I'm getting. Where's the rest of it?
Yeah. So that was kind of like the introductory stuff about you, about the way, and kind of now more into Stone and Steel. So there's a lot to get into with this book. There's a lot to like. But one thing that really struck me was about the main character, Aaliyah, and her relationship with her father. I'll give a quick summary of the book for people who aren't familiar. It's right here. It'll be real fast. So Stone and Steel is a sapphic fantasy novella, and the blurb on the back says, when General Aaliyah returns to her city triumphant, she expects to find the people of Titus prospering under the rule of her queen and lover, the beautiful stone mage Odessa. Instead, she finds a troubling imbalance in both the citizens' well-being and Odessa's rule. Aaliyah must now rely on all of her allies, old and new, to do right by the city that made her. And this is Aaliyah on the cover. So, one of the things that struck me about this story, because it's not in the blurb and I wasn't expecting to find it, was Aaliyah's relationship with her father. Aaliyah's kind of doesn't really have a relationship with her parents anymore. Her father wasn't in the picture really ever for her, and there's a point where they cross paths at some point in the book, and it ended up being like one of my favorite relationships of the story, like easily top 3.
Oh, I love that.
What led you to write that relationship? Was there something that like inspired that story? Yeah, I was just really like intrigued by it. It's complicated and it made me feel a lot of things. So I want to hear about like how you wrote it and all that.
Yeah, so Aaliyah doesn't have a relationship with either of her parents growing up, and so I think that makes her susceptible to the right kinds of affection, right? That she like sort of craves a relationship that takes the place of those two bonds that she doesn't have, of her mother and her father. And so it felt like where she is at that moment of the story, she kind of needed someone to come back and be the new person to sort of fill this void that she has, even though she has all of her amazing friends and this exceptional family that she's built over the years. Here is this person that she sort of always hoped she would have a relationship with, right? That like, I don't know. I think sorry, my own personal story is sort of similar, so that's why I'm pausing. I'm like, yeah,
you don't have to share.
No, it's more the like, what, have I mentioned this to my therapist that I wrote this into a book? I don't think I have. I probably should at some point. But that like sense of being able to come back to this relationship she never thought she would have, right? Of like her mother is like walked out on purpose intentionally, and her father, eventually we find out he didn't really have an opportunity to walk out. He just wasn't present. So she kind of gets this opportunity to get this relationship back. And I wanted her to have that like she's losing so much throughout this story. She has all this pain and suffering she has to deal with. And so she gets a little bit of joy back. And it also helps that he can support her in doing what she needs to do to make things work.
Yeah. Aaliyah sort of has a fill-in father figure, right? Like there's Mercy, her childhood friend Mercy had a father who was kind of watching over her. But he's kind of gone by the time the book starts, so you don't know.
Yeah, and that's even complicated, right? Because Mercy's father was like drug kingpin slash like brothel runner, so he used her as a runner. He like she works for him. So even though there is that familial relationship, there's a little bit that father figure relationship. It's hard to know, right? Was like that about business more than it was about like loving this child? Maybe it was more about like, oh no, I actually like this kid. But there is always that little bit of tension around like these big relationships for her, of somebody getting what they need versus actually just wanting her for her sake.
Yeah. I was kind of, just as you mentioned, like why you wrote the relationship, I was thinking about like that Aaliyah does have a family, but it's sort of like a network of siblings. Like she doesn't really have someone who's like older, more experienced, who can kind of help her through some of the things that she's struggling with. It's kind of like everyone's kind of at the same point, like, oh no, what do we do next? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, exactly. We're all trying to figure it out, and one of us will play mom at one point, or one of us will play dad or parent at some point, but we're all figuring it out and we're not sure. So she doesn't actually have that like adult figure to come in and explain how things should go. And it's actually something I want to do in future work. I feel like I don't have a lot of older characters in some of my work, so I want to explore that in the future. But yeah, in this piece, there isn't a figure who stands as the like parental unit of their family. There's just these good point of like siblings, cousins hanging around each other.
So we kind of, you touched on it a little bit, that that Aaliyah was sort of involved in like this drug running business and like this crime pin. I don't know if it's really a business, but like that.
it's a business. It's not a legal business, but it's a business. He's making money.
Enterprise. And I was just thinking in general about sort of like what types of Black queer characters are we seeing in media and television and books and stories. And I was wondering if like, do you feel, because as I was thinking about it, I was like, there's so few that are Black and queer that I can like name off the top of my head that I don't really know if it feels like there's a mold yet. I was wondering if you feel like there's like a certain like respectable framework for stories, or like certain molds that people want your characters to be. And I was wondering how you dealt with that when you're writing Aaliyah's character in this world.
Yeah, it's interesting. I struggled a little bit in thinking about her, whether or not I wanted her to have a connection to the like drug business. But to me, you know, there's like a vast expanse of what it means to be Black, of what it means to be queer, of what it means to, you know, live in your community. And I wanted to be able to express that. I think I was, you know, like if you only show people who are well behaved, then do you actually get to understand that like people make different choices? Like Aaliyah ran drugs and now she's the general of a mighty army of the whole country. You can do both things. You're not a horrible human being because you did one thing. Sometimes you can be redeemed. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes people stick into the business. And actually there are reasons why people do stay, right? Like Mercy runs her father's business still. That's what she does. She runs drugs. She runs a brothel. There are girls that are going in and out of her house. It doesn't make her a bad person. It just makes her a particular kind of businesswoman. And I think I wanted to be able to show that right, that sorry, you don't have to be super well behaved in order to deserve a story or be the hero of your story or the heroine of your story. You just have to be. And that I think feels more true to the real world, even though we're talking about a secondary world fantasy, right?
Yeah, in terms of letting people be, this is another question I just kind of thought of. I was thinking about like Aaliyah's arc and how she makes like mistakes as well. Like one of them is that she's a very powerful warrior and she thinks that her sister Odessa is going to be a good leader, and so she deposes the king who came before her and puts her on the throne. And Odessa turns out to be a questionable ruler at best. And
great way to phrase it.
And I think I was struck by was how forgiving people were of that decision. That like not Odessa. Aaliyah is basically like a kingmaker, a queen maker. And people have been kind of warning her, like, I don't know about Odessa. I don't know.
Not sure about your girl, but okay, I guess. If you say so.
And when Aaliyah finally comes around, I think that people had a lot of like grace and empathy for her, like even people that she'd kind of brushed aside. when they had warned her. And I guess, what do you think it is about her character that makes people like warm up to her so much?
Yeah, I think it is that Aaliyah, to her core, wants to help people. If she makes the wrong decision, it's for the right reason. And so even when it's the wrong decision, you can kind of go, I get why you thought that was going to work. I wish you listened to me, but I understand what you thought. She has this core belief in her that the people that she surrounds herself are good people. What that means, I think, for her sometimes is that she erases some of the bad, right? Like there's a way that she should have seen probably that Odessa was not going to be the best ruler for Titus, but she didn't see it. She missed it. That's fine. She chose a father figure who's a crime lord. Maybe that's not the best choice. I don't know. Leah makes her own decisions. But I think people accept that she wants to do right, and she wants to do right by the people. They accept her word, and she's true to it, right? She's like, so for instance, her relationship with Halima is based entirely around her best friend. Her second is based entirely around her protecting Halima and making sure Halima ate as a kid. And so, of course, Halima is loyal and can give her a bit of grace. You protected me and kept me alive. Sure, you made the wrong decision here, but I know you did it for the right reason. And I think that's true for all of the other characters. They can all see that and embrace it and just accept that she might not make great decisions all the time, but she means to do the best she can do. And she corrects herself quickly. That's the other thing about Aaliyah, right? Is as much as she makes a mistake, she isn't sitting there like, no, I'm going to stand in my ground on this. This is the right choice when I can see it's clearly the wrong one. Once she realizes it's the wrong choice, she does her best to make right and figure out what to do next.
Yeah, sorry, I was looking at the next question. I was thinking if I want to expand on this one or go into that one. Yeah, Aaliyah's she's a very lovable character. Very easy to root for.
You want to like her. Even when you're mad, you're like, oh, but okay, all right.
I was thinking about like Aaliyah's relationships with the other people in the military with her, like her first in command and stuff like that. Like I feel like I can't remember exactly who it was, but I remember like she greets people by dapping and like how she speaks to other people. It felt very rooted in like African American culture. And I haven't read too many books that are like in secondary, like not our world, like not even like Portal world, like a completely new world where like African American culture is the base. And I was wondering, and to me also some of it just felt very like contemporary, like the concerns the characters had and like how some of them were like living. I don't know, it felt like very like now, like
yeah.
I'm having trouble explaining it, but I didn't feel like it was like
no, I get what you mean.
It's not based on some like Europe of yesteryear. It's like something about it felt very like current and very like based on like issues that people are dealing with today. And I was wondering like what inspired that decision. Were there other like books that you look to? I know you kind of talked about some of your comps. It made me excited when I saw some of your comps. And were there any challenges that like came with that decision, or was it like a pretty natural thing to do?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I took a lot of inspiration from Ashante Wilson's novellas, right? That like blend in of our language into this world that is not our own in many ways. There are ways that it is. And I was really like, ooh, I want to play with that too. And then I think the other piece of it was wanting to bring in some of my own experience and some of like my own childhood. So like the Ville, which is the center of the like drug area, is based on a neighborhood from when I was growing up, and like people I knew, things I would see, not because I was deeply involved in that world, but because I could see it and was watching it happen alongside. And I think that some of that shows up there. But I also felt like, yeah, I didn't want to do as much as this story has been inspired by, so I always tell this story that I blame Brent Lambert fire for this book because he had the prompt of combine Game of Thrones and the 5th season, and I was like, okay, I could do that. And I started off with a moment of Aaliyah killing the last king and putting Odessa on the throne. And so there's a way in which, like, Game of Thrones, right, is deeply European and epic fantasy. And then you have like the Broken Earth series and the 5th season, and like that's not that at all. And so what I wanted, right, is this like more this world that feels a little bit more Black, for lack of a better word, right, is just like deeply rooted in our culture, but still has some of those elements that feel like they're part of what we think of as epic fantasy, right? Like we're talking about this country in a way that feels more epic fantasy. So like Titan and Titus feel more like that epic fantasy type vibe. But when you're on the ground, what you're getting is the sort of contemporary problems that we have of like, what are you doing when there's drug abuse and like a whole drug war potentially, right, with the Adu, and when you're dealing with people who are sick and homelessness, and like that's a huge thing for us, and it's something that needs to be solved, but we don't see it, I think, addressed in that way in a lot of epic fantasy because of just the way it's framed. And I wanted to be able to explore some of those things, and I wanted Aaliyah to try and address that, right? Like that's part of her purpose is I don't want this stuff to be in my world. I think we could do better. How do I fix it?
I'm sorry.
I don't know if I answered any of the question you asked,
No,
but I said a whole bunch of things.
I think you did. I was fiddling around off screen. I was looking to see if there was a map in here because I was like, oh, right, there's other kingdoms in there. And I was like, oh, there's no map.
No, sorry.
maybe later down the line, if there's more stories in this universe.
If maybe. If that happens, maybe. I keep telling people keep asking me, right, are there more stories here? We're going to see more of Aaliyah. And I'm like, no, that was it, guys. That's it. But the more people ask, the more I'm like, well, it's not impossible.
So the reason I was going to show the map was because there is 3 main countries that we talk about here. Blanking on what they're off the top of my head. But I was wondering, like, what is that like deciding, say, we don't see quite as much of them as we do of the main kingdom of Titus, but they also felt like they had like a cultural base that was set in our world. And I was kind of wondering, how is it, like, how do you decide, like, when you're like, oh, Aaliyah has to go get like allies, like, how is she going to go get the allies? Like, when you're deciding how to order your world and like what you want these other worlds to look like, what was that process like for you?
Yeah, the main country that they visit is Galavera, which is the next closest one. And then the one on the other side, I'm also blanking on the name, but it's because it has very little relevance to this story. I think it's mentioned one time, just so you know that it happened. Yeah. But so I'm a total pantser. So I wrote and figured out what was going to happen. And then I was like, okay, and how does this make sense? Like, how long is it going to take them to get from Titus and from the inner city to Galavera and to where the seat of that power sits? And I was like, I don't know. How fast do horses travel? That sounds like too much math. Oh, Oxnard. Thank you, Andre. Somebody knows. I'm so glad. Yeah, but so it was hard having to decide, right? Like, is this a 10-day journey? Is this a month-long journey? I don't know. I think I erred on the side of easier for me and was like, let's just get here quickly. It's not that far. Everything's close. We're all very snug. But it was fun thinking about, right, like, what are the cultures I want to pull from? Obviously, Titus is much more like rooted in Blackness. And so like that was the basis of that. Galavera is sort of a mix, I would say, of like East Indian. There's like some Middle Eastern type vibes going on in that country. And then Oxnard is to simplify for the white people. And that was something I just decided early on, right? Like, those are the cultures I want to pull for. that made it easy because I didn't address Oxnard very much. So I didn't have to talk about whiteness a ton, other than like the little drops of, yeah, people travel. And so you're going to see folks who look all kinds of ways. But I didn't have to focus on it as much.
Thanks for sharing that. I don't know. I was like trying to think of it in my head. I was like, there must be a map. I feel like this book has to have a map, but
It doesn't.
Making up false memories here, I guess. So in addition to like being this epic fantasy kingdom, there's also an epic fantasy magic system. Mm-hmm. And I was curious. It's based on elements. How did you decide like what elements you wanted to use in the magic system? And how did you decide that like Aaliyah wasn't going to be a mage?
That was probably the easiest decision because I wanted Aaliyah to be the underdog, even though like she's a general of this whole army. She is high level. She's a badass. But at the same time, she doesn't have the benefit of magic to go back and forth, which means she has to be a lot smarter about the decisions that she makes. And that's even part of her struggle as she's like trying to decide what her next steps are, is I don't have magic. How am I supposed to battle this woman I put on the throne who is extremely magical when I have none of that? And she manages to do it anyway, right? That like, she just is, it's the difference between her and Odessa. Odessa believes she can do everything on her own. It's beneficial to her to have someone else do stuff and then she can be lazy and not do it. But she doesn't actually feel like she needs anyone else. Whereas Aaliyah is so much more about like, I need my crew and my crew has to be prepared to do whatever needs to be done. So I have Sharad who has fire magic. I have Mercy who has bone magic. That's basically all of the magics I think that get covered, but within her crew. But I have people around me who can do the things I need to do. And I know my role in that is to be the like berserker with a sword, and that's fine with me, or with a spear, I should say. And that's fine with me, but I know I need the community to be with me. She's much more about like, how can we as a crew survive? Where Odessa is like, I'm a bad bitch and I can do this myself. I don't need you. I choose to keep you around because you're cute, but I don't need you. The magic system, I think, came from a little bit, right, that like broken earth sort of thing, right? I wanted Odessa to be playing with stone as part of that like reference back to the original. And then I think the elements felt just very natural. I feel like I was inspired by something I was reading at the time as well. And so it felt natural, right? That like, okay, water, yeah, let's play with that. That's sort of natural and traditional. Air, same thing. Fire, same thing. Earth, same thing. And then you have stone and you have bone and you have iron, which is the other one that is sort of like new and unique. Iron was the last king, so we get rid of that pretty quickly because nobody's allowed to do what the old king did. And then stone is where Odessa lives in her power. And then the bone magic just was like, how do you like what? How can we play with this? I want to do something fun. Fun. Bone magic is not fun. It's very violent. I'm just tearing people's bones apart and putting them back together. Maybe I shouldn't say that's fun, but it is. It's a great time, right, to think about how Mercy plays with that magic of being able to break someone's bones and like be really efficient as a killer, but also using it to heal as well and having this sort of multiplicity. So it just sort of came together, I think, fairly naturally.
Have you seen Avatar: The Last Airbender?
I have not.
Oh my goodness!
Yes, I know. But but that's what I mean about it feeling so natural is that like I haven't watched Avatar, but I know of it. So it was like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Y'all are doing this little magic over here. That's basic. And then we'll add a couple things on top of it.
Okay. So I was gonna ask because to me the bone magic like vaguely reminded me of bloodbending. Like in Avatar, there are
I didn't know bloodbending was a thing, but okay.
In Avatar, like I guess there's like the four main elements, and then there's kind of like subdivisions in each as people learn how to apply them in different ways. And so one of the main branches is waterbending, and you know humans are like however much just big sloppy
70%
water.
something.
And so there are like bloodbenders who can like move people around and stuff. And like it's not quite the same as blood magic, but like some of the fight scenes, I was kind of wondering if you had seen that at all, but you haven't. So
Sorry, no.
what's it called? Syncretic. The thing, no, it's not syncretism. When the two things evolve on their own but separately.
Oh, I don't know.
And there's a fancy word for it that I learned at one point, and I don't remember it anymore. Oh well.
Sorry.
Fine. But that is interesting. Oh, wait, what's in this comment? No, I didn't. Okay. But it was interesting what you said about how Aaliyah not being a mage forces her to like work together with people, because I think a big thing in this story is family and like groups and cohorts and getting people to work together. And we've kind of talked a little bit about Odessa. We've talked a little bit about Mercy. I don't know if you can talk much more about Mercy without giving stuff away.
Yeah, she's so integral to making things happen that anytime you talk more about her, you probably are getting deeper into spoiler territory.
Yeah, but she's a lot of fun, and her name's very ironic.
Well, it's Mercedes. It just so happens they call her Mercy, right?
And I was wondering about, was it, you said Sharad and Halima are the other two who work with Aaliyah. And how did you, I guess, decide to like, I'm sorry, that is a spam message, which I get quite a lot of. But like another place that Aaliyah finds family is like not just in the Ville, but also in the military. And Halima and Sharad are like very, very tight with her. And I was wondering, did you have to do any research to write about that? Was there like a certain book or movie that like inspired you to write about like those connections?
No, this is what comes from being a pantser and also just like a very bad world builder. That's me. I did very little research. I think I probably glanced one time, right, at like, what are the ranks in an army? What does that look like? Cool. Sounds great. That's what's happening here then. And that's about all the research I did. And then just sort of made it up as I went along and hope for the best. I wasn't too worried about it, right? Because I'm not working in our world, which means if it doesn't work exactly for our military system, I could just wave it away. That's the way I like to think of it, right? Yeah, that's just the way their army works. Don't worry about it. Stop asking those questions. Why are you noticing that doesn't make any sense? Don't pay attention.
I didn't notice anything, so
perfect. See, that's
complete projection.
It works. There's somebody who's in the military who's very upset about the way that this military structure looks, but that's fine.
It's okay. Unless they email you about it or tag you on Twitter, it's fine. But yeah, there's like a couple different warriors in here too, right? Like Aaliyah has her spear. She picks up the mages who are also archers from Galavera. How did you pick which weapons you wanted people to have if they weren't going to be mages? I feel like weapons are a lot of fun too.
Yeah, I very specifically was trying to be away from swords and blades because I think, again, I was trying to get away from this sort of traditional epic fantasy. Everybody's got a sword and it's big and they want to swing it. So instead, we have spears, which, are basically longsword. I suppose you could make that same thing, but spears made sense to me as a like callback to African traditions and that sort of thing. And then in terms of the archers, I just think archery is so cool. Have you ever heard of an archer and not been like, man, that person is probably a badass? I don't think so. So our archers then made sense, and also made sense with the magic, right? That like, okay, if what I do is I have air magic, I can use the arrows to make the arrows go further or make them go faster. If I have fire magic, I can light that arrow as it arrives where it's supposed to be, instead of having it going the whole time, right? So it's not signaling to someone that it's flying through the air if they haven't noticed yet. But yeah, and I wanted people to feel like I wanted people to feel like, yep, characters to feel like they had opportunity to fight in multiple ways, right? Like the mages don't just know magic, they should know how to fight as well, because what if you get in a situation where you can't use it, where it's unsafe to use your magic? So they needed to have various ways. It couldn't just be magic or nothing. And Galavera very much is like that, right? Like I think in Titus, you have folks who have their job, right? If you're an air mage, you're going to probably do air magic the whole time. And then there's somebody over here who's got their arrow, and you guys are probably not crossing. Whereas in Galavera, everybody who's in the army has some magical ability, but also is expected to do, hand-to-hand combat and be able to use their sword, spear, whatever it is. And I wanted to play with that a little bit. So having that difference between the two armies as well, that like there are strengths to both things and there are weaknesses to both things.
Just like a random question. Is there a reason why none of them are like mounted? Like there aren't any like war horses or war beasts of some sort?
There are technically, because Aaliyah loses her horse very early on and gets really upset about that. But but I think it was trying to like narrow things down. I have so many characters in this little novella, right? Because it's so much about family and so much about people being together, that it was almost like, if I have to figure out how to get the horses to go also, it's just going to be too much. So we'll narrow it down to human beings, and all of the animals could be here, but they're not, for reasons. Don't ask what the reasons are.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
So just like in general, what was the easiest part of the story to write, and like what was the most difficult? You mentioned that you're a pantser, and so that causes.
Yeah, I think the easiest part probably was getting the base story down for Aaliyah and Odessa was probably the easiest part, only because I knew, even from the original version of the prompt, right, that Odessa was not going to be whatever she was supposed to be, and that Aaliyah was going to have to deal with that at some point. So that was probably the easiest part to write. And then adding on those like additional layers, was probably the hardest part, because I think it's hard to know how many layers you can add into a story, right? So you've got the return of Aaliyah's father at some point. You have the romantic subplot that happens. You have, still dealing with all of these outside friends who I didn't want to lose. That's probably my other weakness, is I'm like, I want everybody to be here. All of us should be in the book at some point. So there's like all of these characters who you see one time, but like they're truly important to Aaliyah's life, so they cannot leave the narrative. And figuring out where do you actually have to stop and say, okay, that person can't be here, or I'm really going to force them to be here, and hopefully that's okay. That was the hard part. It's the editing, actually, right? The revision is the hard part. The drafting is easy. Figuring out how to make it actually work in the end, in the edit, is the hard part.
No, it's fun listening to writers talk about their process, because I feel like, I don't know, you said like people, and you're like, oh no, they're not people, they're characters. And I'm like, but they kind of are people. Like how writers talk about them. Like it's funny, there's some writers who are like, my characters need a break, and I just imagine, well, this is specifically with Brianna Lawrence, who's talking about, like, she has a series about Black queer magical girls, and she's like, they need a rest. And I'm just like imagining like Professor X getting like all the Powerpuff Girls together and bringing them their snacks. And like when you're talking about how like you can't come here, I'm just like imagining you as a bouncer, like, I'm sorry, you have to go. You can't continue the story.
Listen, you're welcome to be in that tower by yourself, but we are not coming to see you. Get over it. That is a little bit what it's like.
They could get spinoffs, and you could write more about the world.
I could. Who knows?
Maybe someday.
Someday, who knows?
I'm sorry, I kind of blanked. Did you say what the easiest part was?
Oh, the easiest part, I think, was just the like, just getting Odessa and Aaliyah to deal with their ish. That was the easy part. Although solving for my lovely Aaliyah's inability to do magic was a little bit difficult, because as I said, right, she has to rely on other people a lot to actually make things work, especially against Odessa, because Odessa not only does magic, but she knows all of Aaliyah's buttons. She pushes them all of the time, so she knows exactly what to do to make things worse for her. So that was difficult, probably, actually, beyond just generally editing and telling people to go away.
Is there like a relationship that was your favorite to write in the story? Like I know I think I have like my top three, and I'm wondering what was the most fun to actually like write and think up.
I really like writing Odessa and Aaliyah together only because there is so much of Odessa that is probably manipulation and probably just a performance, but you kind of can't tell, right? Like there are these moments where she's very sweet and very kind and she's like giving to Aaliyah and you're like, yeah, okay, no, maybe this is working, maybe everything's fine, it's probably okay. And then you see her at the other side and you're like, oh, this is what was under all of that stuff. And so that was kind of fun to do, especially because Odessa's a little bit dramatic, just a little bit dramatic. And so that also is fun to write. And then obviously Mercy and Aaliyah are fun to write as well because they have all of that history and all of these like thinly veiled desires to touch each other, be together, but refusing to do it because you put up a wall and I'm not coming back to you. It's a little bit dramatic. The whole thing is a little bit dramatic, in case you weren't clear. And then is there another one that's fun? I mean, I also like writing Aaliyah's dad and his boo thing. They're not important to the story in a huge way, but I love them together as a couple. And if I was going to do a spinoff, it probably would be that because they're just
Probably.
super cute.
That would be very interesting. Then we could see more of Galavera. Maybe we could get a map.
Maybe we'd get a map. Maybe we could get to Oxnard somehow. I don't know why we'd go there, but
yeah, what is an Oxnard? I thought it was just like marriage proposals for kingdom security. Like
yeah, that's it. That's all we've got right now. You can marry well and have an alliance. That's all Oxnard's offering.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I had a question and then it just like left my brain.
That'll happen.
Oh. So, we kind of talked a little bit about like what your relationship with the genre has been like and like comps for this book. What's on your TBR like right now? Like what are your like top 5 books you're trying to get to this year?
Ooh, I literally built it because I both want to read the things that are in my house, which is a bad habit I have, right? I think most people have this habit. Most readers have this habit of, I bought 17 billion things. They're all in my house. I need to read all of them. And yet I'm going to buy 17 billion more things to bring into the house. So I have a pile that's sitting by my bed right now of, there's a combination of books that were published last year and at least one thing that was published this year. So like one of the things is Eden Royce's Root Magic, which just came out the other day, is sitting by my bed. The Year of the Witching is sitting by my bed. I just started that one last night. I'm like a page in, but very excited about where we're headed already. Docile is sitting there. What else is sitting there? The Black Sun. There's a bunch of other things, but those are the ones that are pinging to my brain right this minute. Oh, you know what else is over there? The most recent Mercy Thompson novel, which I can't remember the title of, but it's also there because I'm obsessed with that series of books.
I'm not familiar. Do you mind explaining what it is?
Oh, yeah. So it is an urban fantasy set in, it's going to bother me that I don't know, Kennewick, Washington, I think. I think it's Washington, about a coyote or a half coyote woman who is vaguely in love with this werewolf, and they're like solving all of these paranormal related issues that are coming up. So it's a long running series. I want to say this is like book 18 or something. And we've gotten a whole bunch of new creatures and fun stuff. But I really love that series a lot. So I buy all of the new ones, and then they sit for a very long time. Like, I think that book came out last March, and I'm pretty sure there's a new book coming out this March that I will buy and sit around and wait for another year to read.
My bookshelf is very cramped, so I was like, I'll take off the books that like I need to read and like put them in inconvenient piles in my room, and surely that will just like make me feel backward that I'll read them. And like, no, my room is just like a landmine of books basically, and I can't walk anywhere in it.
Oh yeah, but you knock some over eventually. Hopefully they'll get read, right? And then I have the bad habit of getting things from the library. So I know there are library books that both, like, I have two, I think, that are sitting by the door. And then I got hold notifications for a couple more. And I'm like, when am I going to read this? I already have a big pile of books. When am I going to read this? Oh, well, I guess I'm doing it now.
I mean, it's dangerous now because my library, at least, they're not doing fines anymore because everything's slowed down with COVID.
Yes.
So they're like, oh, like up to 5 days, expect like we're not even going to have it in the system. And I'm like,
so what you're saying is I could keep this forever, and you're basically going to do
nothing. Yeah, I think that was all the questions I had. Was there anything else you want to talk about? I feel like we missed.
Ooh, I don't think so. I feel like we touched on some of the big things. Yeah, I think we got it all.
Cool. Well, thank you for joining me. Are there any upcoming projects or short stories or something that you'd like to promote?
Yes, so I do have a new story coming out in Stellium Literary Magazine, which I think is in the inaugural issue, and that is coming, I think it's February 1st, so right around the corner. And that story is called Spell for Moving On from Heartbreak, and it is magical, it's contemporary, it's about friendship, it's about love, it's about matters of the heart, and, all of the things you could want in a fantasy short story, I think. Me personally, all the things I want. And then other than that, I am just writing and trying to revise and hopefully, get an agent and sell a book at some point. Sometime. Who knows when? It'll happen eventually.
Okay, well, I definitely hope that you get that agent, and I definitely hope that book gets sold and we can read it ASAP, Julie. Thank you again for joining us. Thank you for writing this book and, all of that. Hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. Hope the rest of the viewers enjoy your weekend. Bye, everybody.
Bye.